This is a press conference to discuss. We will be introducing soon, several of us, legislation for nonpartisan redistricting processes. This is not about the current maps. I recall the first bill I did on this subject was 26 years ago. If it had passed with an effective date 30 years later, we'd probably be in good shape, right? But then others carried it forward, John Weatherly, many others. It's been Ellie Kinnaird, it's been bipartisan idea. The idea is that in constructing districts, the people with the most at stake are probably ones who shouldn't be doing the details. It's not about squiggly lines or maps that look bad. They're always going to look bad because of the Voting Rights Act, or at least as long as that's in effect. But it is about making the process fairer. And I'm hopeful that we'll be successful this time. We're in a window of time of 2 or 3 years. In the last decade, it took 9 years to resolve all the redistricting fights, lawsuits. This year, they've all been resolved after 4 years. That's progress. So we're in a window of time where each party can look at the situation after the 2020 census and not really know who will win. This is the time to consider nonpartisan redistricting. I'd like to introduce Representative Charlie Jeter, who is also working on a bill to this effect.
Thank you, Representative Stam, and everyone for being here. I think you'll look around this room and you'll see a pretty bipartisan effort. There's a couple bills that are going to be filed. Representative Stam has his. Senator Jackson to my left. He and I will file a bill tomorrow. Our bill is a little bit different. Going to Representative Stam's point about the first time he filed this bill in 1989, had he taken the strategy we hope to approach, it would have passed. Our bill won't go into effect till after the 2030 election cycle, in large part because it grandfathers everyone out except for Mickey Mashaw. Please don't tell him I said that. But, you know, and everybody says that's a long time out. It's 15 years. I get it. But going back, had we done that in '89, it would be the law today. And to some degree, I think this is about getting the bill passed. The second thing is my bill and Senator Jackson's bill is a constitutional amendment. It requires a vote of the people. It allows them to have direct involvement in their decision-making process of what they want to do. But let me make one thing certain. I like my bill, but I like Skip's bill. I like any bill that will go to an independent redistricting. And we are all here together to make sure that we change the way we draw the lines. Not because they were not done appropriately, fair, or legal. They certainly have been based on all the judicial decisions we've had. But because we think there's a better way to do it, and you've got a bipartisan group. You look around this room and the areas they come from, urban, rural, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, every title, every brand is in this room today. And I think that should say a lot. And I'm hopeful whichever or both bills get passed, the Senate will have an option. And hopefully we can move forward and get this done. And I'm just, this to me is a watershed moment for North Carolina. Grier?
Are you supposed to introduce me?
I'm supposed to introduce Grier.
I'm Grier. We've gathered here today folks that vote against each other on so many important issues facing our state in unity because of the problem that we all agree is one of the greatest problems facing our state and facing our country, which is the growing perception amongst citizens that they cannot have a voice in our system of democracy. If you look at my district right now, I'm a Democrat. I'm in a safe Democratic seat. A Republican voter in my district really, in the end, can actually say that their vote really can have no impact on me because they would be unable to unseat me. And I've got Republican friends across the aisle in whose districts a Democratic voter could say the same thing. We need to have more districts where folks are elected because they were able to build a consensus amongst their voters, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, and unaffiliated, that they were the candidate who could best represent their collective interests. In the end, as much as it pains me to say it, we need more legislators like Charlie Jeter.
Jeter.
We need legislators who are elected because they could build consensus and work across the aisle in order to get elected, because they'll bring those same traits to the General Assembly. Conservative or liberal in politics, if they're moderate in temperament, they'll find a way to get things done for the people of North Carolina here. If the people of North Carolina can see that getting done, I think we'll go a long way towards restoring their faith in our system of democracy. Unless we take actions like that and act now, I think our system really has no hope. And so it's a deep honor to be here with Democratic friends, Republican friends. We might have an unaffiliated friend here also who support this effort to get it done because it's the right thing to do for North Carolina. I'd like to introduce now Representative Jon Hardister from Guilford County. Jon and I vote differently on so many things, but we share a love for cars with big engines and also improving our political process.
Yeah, but we don't break the speed limit. Good afternoon. It's great to see everybody. For me, this bill, well, we might have two bills, or we may have one, we're not sure, but I think we're all in agreement that redistricting reform is necessary. For me, it's about good government. It's about the golden rule, treating others the way you want to be treated. Many Republicans, including myself, advocated for redistricting reform when Democrats were in the majority in North Carolina. It was the right thing to do then, and it's still the right thing to do today. And I'm proud to work with my colleagues in a bipartisan fashion to achieve this goal, and I hope we can get it done. And is the mayor of Morrisville, the mayor pro tem, with us today? Yeah, we have a special guest who would like to share her thoughts. We have Liz Johnson. She's a mayor pro tem of Morrisville, and I believe you've been on the council since 1999.
That's correct.
And you're a former, or you're IBM engineer, systems.
Systems engineer, you've done your homework.
Well, please welcome Liz Johnson, and you're also on the board of directors of the League of Municipalities.
That is correct.
And she would like to share her thoughts on this topic.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. Before I begin my remarks, I just want to thank all the legislators that are here today for their willingness to support these bills that we've heard about today. And also, I want to thank all the folks that are here from the different organizations that are in support of fair and independent redistricting. As you've heard, I am Mayor Pro Tem of the town of Morrisville. I also sit on the North Carolina League of Municipalities Board of Directors and co-chair one of the League's 3 advocacy organizations. In December, the membership of the North Carolina League of Municipalities adopted one of our legislative goals to support legislation providing for fair, transparent, and nonpartisan methods of drawing legislative and congressional districts. Now, you might ask why. Obviously, the topic is not the typical concern of municipal government. The vast majority of city and town councils are chosen in nonpartisan elections. How legislative and congressional districts are drawn would appear to be far removed from the problems that municipal governments are faced with resolving every day. A lot of the criticism of the current system focuses on the lack of competitiveness of gerrymandered districts and how the voice of the political middle is diminished when political party is the driving motive for how districts are formulated. These are not inconsequential concerns. It's important to point out that these concerns also are not new. Several of the legislators who are here today representing both political parties have been making the case for reform for many years. But what is lost in the discussion at times is how the current redistricting process can split communities with similar problems and similar needs. Dividing communities of interest can leave these communities without the strong, unified voice that they need at the legislature. It can leave voters with similar economic interests, whether it's technology workers in and around RTP, farmers and agricultural workers in rural North Carolina, or the residents of a small college town. It leaves them split up and fractured when it comes to these political representations. Regardless of your political party, whether it is the one in power or the one not, having district lines drawn in ways that keep communities of interest intact is critical for effective representation. Obviously, efforts to reform the system like this one will always have their critics. Typically, that criticism focuses on the fact when it comes to politics, everyone is a partisan. We all have our political leanings. No one is asking anyone to do the impossible and shed those political leanings. What we are asking for is a process and criteria set in law that allows for, and in fact demands, that the politics be set aside in a very transparent way while the districts are drawn. This is not impossible. It's happening in other states. In many of those states, races are more competitive, districts are more compact, and voters are more satisfied. Doing the same here, we can improve public confidence in our electoral system and better ensure that voters have real choice at the ballot box. We can make clear that in North Carolina, we want good government, solutions that work for everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. And I'm supposed to...
Representative Chuck McGrady.
Thank you.
Representative Jeter is trying to make up for his mistake. He was supposed to introduce me, but he's explained that he was educated in South Carolina, and so he has a good excuse. I represent a district very different from the area in and around Representative Martin's district. You could not probably create a Democratic district given the one county requirement in the Constitution in Henderson County. But I'm here because this issue back 10 and 15 years ago was an issue championed by Republicans where Democrats were ambivalent or not wanting to make it a priority. Things have changed, and we're in a very different situation, and we really have everything has turned the other way. And what I'd say to my fellow Republicans is this was right 10 years, 15 years ago when we were not in the majority. And it's still right that we make sure the system works in a fair way and we create confidence in our voters that we're not playing games with redistricting. So this bill is, to my colleagues, is right for the same reasons they voted for it 15 years ago. And I'm glad to have a larger group of Democrats join us in supporting the bill now. And
We're going to, in a few minutes, we'll open up the floor to questions, but we do have two more special guests with us today. We have Mr. Chris Fitzsimon of NC Policy Watch, which is a progressive organization, and we have Mr. Jon Hood of the Pope Foundation, which is a conservative organization. And these two gentlemen have had some interesting debates on public policy in North Carolina. They don't agree very often, but they do agree on this issue. If a fight breaks out between the two of them, I will be the mediator. But first, I'd like to bring up Mr. Chris Fitzsimon of, I apologize. See, the fight is already broken out. Mr. Jon Hood of the Pope Foundation.
If Chris is from a progressive group, I guess I'm from a regressive group. At the beginning of Shakespeare's Macbeth, three grotesque witches enter the stage accompanied by thunder and lightning. Now, this is not a commentary on people who have spoken before or after me, necessarily. You may recall that the witches end up chanting in unison, "Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air." Now, Macbeth, the play, is about contrasts and inversions. Characters perceive themselves to be good, yet they end up doing evil. And characters that are clearly portrayed as evil at the beginning of the story actually believe that they are advancing towards some conception of the good. I make this observation because the redistricting debate, the drama here in North Carolina today, is also about contrasts and inversions. When Democrats were in control, they generally rejected calls for redistricting reform by arguing that they were just following the rules of the game that they didn't invent, or even that the goal of maximizing the control of the legislature by the Democrats was more important than maximizing competitive politics because, in their minds, Democrats had the right answers to North Carolina's questions, North Carolina's problems. And at the time, Republicans argued they thought their ideas were valuable. They thought that the best way to decide these questions would be through competitive elections, with voters choosing among viable candidates as much as possible, having a chance of winning. They also warned Democrats not to assume they'd be in power the next time redistricting would come along. Now, for some actors in this drama, fair is foul and foul is fair. I think few legislators are being disingenuous or dishonest. I think that you speak from the place you are and your perception of recent history. But this is not a play. This is real life. The stakes are high. It is important for all of us in North Carolina to get the policy right, not just to inhabit some character that we've been assigned to play. We can disagree about the details of redistricting reform. In fact, we have 2 different bills currently being discussed and filed. I'm sure that redistricting reformers would welcome additional alternatives as long as they were consistent with the principle that neutral rules should be our tactic and competitive elections should be our end. It's a principle that people across the political spectrum can share. And with that having been said, something wicked this way comes.
Thank you, Mr. Fowle. I'm Chris Fitzsimon with NC Policy Watch. I'm happy to stand here with people I usually agree with and people I usually disagree with for an issue that we all believe is important for the democracy and the voters. Let's remember the voters are who our democracy is supposed to work for. This is not all that complicated, and it's almost been a cliche at this point, but the idea is to create a system where voters choose their politicians instead of the other way around. Now, we've had in the last several years heated arguments in this building over voter participation and what increases voter turnout, what decreases it. There's still big disagreements about that, and the courts are deciding it. But one reason many people don't vote in North Carolina in many races is that their vote really doesn't matter much in November, as Representative Martin said. Their congressional and legislative race was decided, in effect, for a lot of people in North Carolina when the maps were drawn. That was true when Democrats drew the maps, and it's true under the maps that the Republican majorities have created. And this is not, let me be clear, this is not an attack on the folks currently in charge of the General Assembly. It's a criticism of the process that both parties have used to maximize their political advantage under the law with the districts they have drawn. I was standing here in the 1990s with John Hood pushing redistricting reform when the Democrats were in charge. I was standing here in the 2000s when the Democrats were in charge, standing here with John Hood pushing redistricting reform. And I'm here in 2015, standing here with John Hood pushing redistricting reform when we're not very effective. But if we're serious about wanting to increase the number of people who participate in our democratic process, let's give people more competitive races, and so they feel like their vote counts in November. Let's return some vibrancy to our democracy. With all due respect to the comments of some opponents of redistricting reform, this is not just about what's legal, what the courts say. It's about what's right, giving more power to the people of the state, not just the politicians or whatever political party happens to be in power. So let's make elections battles of ideas and campaigns, not which precinct and which part of which district to exclude from what neighborhood to benefit one political party or the other. And I would submit to you today that now's the perfect time to do it, halfway through this 10-year cycle of redistricting. Who knows what the districts will look like that were drawn 4 years ago, remember, will look like in 2020 or 2030, as we've heard today. We're experiencing in North Carolina all sorts of changes, increasing urbanization, rapid in-migration to the state, changing demographics of neighborhoods and cities and counties. There's no way to predict what the current districts will look like in 2020 or 2030, but I can guarantee you they won't look much like they did when they were drawn in 2011. Both parties should support turning over redistricting to some independent process so whoever wins control in 2020 or 2030 won't have a built-in advantage for 6 or 8 years. So let's give power back to the voters. 88 members of the House courageously voted for redistricting reform in 2011. Many of them are still here. Many of them are standing behind me. Surely many senators, and you can see many here, also see the wisdom of reinvigorating our democracy and taking out a political insurance policy for the 2020 or 2030 election. That is a good thing for the voters to do and the politically wise thing for the elected officials to do. So I'd like to thank all the legislators who are here supporting this effort. And let's hope this is finally the year we set up a saner and more voter-centered way to draw districts in North Carolina. I don't think I can stand more of these press conferences with John Hood. Thank you very much.
We'll take about 10 minutes of questions. Please direct it to a certain person. If you direct it to me, I might refer it to someone who knows more about it. Gary.
I wonder if Representative Jeter or Senator Jackson could talk about the details of their plan just a little bit more.
Senator Jackson? First time at the podium, help yourself.
Thank you very much. Well, it does present a bipartisan redistricting commission. There would be 9 members of the commission. None of them can be an elected official. The appointments, the power to make those appointments is spread throughout all 3 branches of government. So that's the governor, the Supreme Court judge, the chief of our state Supreme Court, and the leaders of the House and the Senate, both majority and minority. There would be protections to put in place to ensure that there is both majority and minority representation. And the commission would be charged with producing 3 possible maps. There would be a 45-day mandatory public comment period prior to producing any maps. But once those maps are produced, the General Assembly would have 120 days to approve one of those maps for each the House, Senate, and Federal House. If they weren't able to do that within 120 days, then the commission would be authorized to make a selection based on a majority vote within the commission. The effective date is 2028. That's when the appointments would be made. And the first round of redistricting that it would impact would happen in 2031.
Next question. Yes, sir.
Senator Jackson, can you explain why
Jackson?
why you would want this to be effective not until 2028, 2031?
Take that one.
Yeah, that was my idea. Chuck McGrady already told you I was educated in South Carolina. To get it done. I think if I'm going to get past all the double speak and the hyperbole and all the things that I probably should say here to make you feel better about it, truth of the matter is, 5 years in politics is soon. And everybody in this room is going to be impacted by if we do it in 5 years. To me, getting it done is the most important thing. And I firmly believe that we will gain more traction with our friends in the lower chamber in the Senate by giving them this option. And when I've reached out to my colleagues in the Senate, they seem to be more amenable to the idea of this having an impact, predominantly not on anybody in this room today for the most part. But we get it on the books, we make it a constitutional law so it can't be changed in the future. I think those compromise positions hopefully make it more likely to be passed in the Senate. I don't doubt any bill could pass in the House within reason. The goal is getting it past the Senate. To me, this is a way to incentivize the Senate to join on board.
Next question, Jim Morrow.
Representative Stam, following up on what he said, how do you expect the bill that you're sponsoring to pass in the Senate when a similar bill a couple of years ago didn't pass there, didn't go anywhere there?
Well, times change, people change, ideas change. You work on it.
Have you had conversations with Senate leadership?
No, no, not this year. I won't get into details, but a couple years ago, I got a bill passed that took me 30 years to get passed, and another one that took 38 years.
How long did the Magna Carta take?
Just one really good war.
It actually lasted 10 days before it was abrogated. Next question. John.
Well, I suppose my question was similar. And what can you do? Either of these bills stand a better chance to pass in the Senate, do you think? Or, I mean, I guess the Senate is what's on all of our minds, I would expect, and that is what's the likelihood that this gets done?
That remains to be seen. Yes, sir.
I had the same question. I guess if we could ask Representative Jeter and Senator Jackson their take. Is there a serious concern that...
Here's what's changed since last year, and I should have mentioned this. Last session and the session before that. We were still in litigation about the current maps. And there was assertions that some, not all, that we couldn't make a change while it was in litigation, or some judge might say, well, send it to a commission. That's what's changed in the last 6 weeks. The litigation is over. You want to comment on that further? No. Next question.
What are the chances there's gonna be another bill in which all of you are gonna be in a room agreeing on something like this?
Well, I think it's not a bad idea to introduce a couple of bills, then you have a conversation about it. If one or more gains more traction, then you can perhaps merge them or submerge them.
Do you support the other bill, as they've indicated they support your bill?
Actually, the text of it is very similar to my 1989 bill, except for the effective date. The effective date, I understand the reasons for it. I don't know. I've got to think about that. Other questions? We got lots of people up here who will answer your questions. Did I see somebody over there? Oh, I couldn't see him. Steve Rao, councilman from Morrisville.
Would there ever be a way, it seems like it's still 15 years is a long time, could the legislature look at putting this as an amendment, a constitutional amendment, so the voters of North Carolina could decide rather than having to wait 15 years?
Well, his legislation would have a referendum soon.
Correct.
The referendum would be soon, it just wouldn't take effect for a while. John?
Then I have a question for you, sir, and that would be if the referendum would happen soon, but to lawmakers, 5 years is a long time. Oh, because,
The only thing I want to say, and I don't want to get too much caught in the weeds, because that wasn't the purpose here today. Senator Jackson and I will file our bill. Make no mistake, I think I speak for everyone up here, much to their chagrin. Sorry, Rick. Our goal is to get this done. And if we're going to provide, we have differing opinions, not differing opinions, but different paths. I don't care which path gets passed. I fully support the Stam concept. I fully support Senator Jackson and I's concept. If somebody else has got a better concept or a different concept that we can get passed and get it to the governor and sign, I support that concept. So I don't want us to get too caught up in the minutia or the differences of the bill, because to me, what's more importantly is this become law in North Carolina. And that's everyone's goal in this room.
If I could call on Representative Martin to comment.
You have to start somewhere. Independent redistricting is something that's worked its way through several other states. Our states are set up in some respect to be the laboratories of democracy. And on the redistricting reform issue, that's proven to be especially be the case. We've got a bill that's passed the House that we know should be able to pass the House again, but we need to be open to ideas that will pass the Senate also, because in many respects the House and the Senate in North Carolina are also supposed to be their own individual laboratories of democracy. So you have to start somewhere. This is where we've started. We'll listen to this as it goes through a House that has many new members that weren't here the last time we looked at this, and we'll continue to listen as it works its way through the Senate for ideas that work for North Carolina. But we had to start somewhere.